right, we are recording live from Miami. This is Pete Dobson and the story of my journey east. So, here we go. Put this off for quite a while. I'm going to tell the story about my journey east. But this is not a story about miracles. Should I stay in one place? Should I stay in one place? No. I mean, will it affect the sound? All right. And I can just edit this whole first part out, right? Later on. Once the recording's done, I can just chop this whole first part off. Oh. Okay. All right. Well, I guess I'll just try to stay in one place and comfortable. Oh, where to begin? The story of the journey. I'm going to wait till you get out of the room. Okay. Does that seem kind of loud to you? No? All right. So the story of the journey east. I don't want to tell this story and have it be a story about miracles or like some feat that I accomplished. I didn't. This is a story about my journey with Jesus and a declaration that he lives and a way to tell the story of his lordship and his supremacy in my life and on earth. It's going to be different kinds of people listening to this story. There's people that know me and like me, and they want to hear the story about miracles. And if that's the case, you're going to miss the good part of the story. And then there's the people that don't like me, and they're just going to hear the story of the miracles, and you're just going to miss the whole point of the story. There's a whole different world that we can live in, a different kingdom. And we don't have to be governed by greed or striving or ambition to make a name for ourselves. The things that are tearing this world apart have crept into the church, and nobody seems to be addressing that. Nobody wants to talk about that. You bring up the issue of freedom to Christians, and you hear, I know Jesus. I'm good. I know Jesus. It's the weirdest thing. You can see pastors that are in complete bondage to depression and anxiety and striving, and you try to explain to them, like, no, there's a better way. Like, Jesus did everything. Not only do you not have to do anything, you're actually required to not do anything. You're not supposed to do anything. He did it all. He has the ultimate title. He paid the ultimate price. He's done everything. There's nothing you can do. There's nothing you can do. Your effort is not required, and it is not wanted in the kingdom of heaven. It's not appreciated in the kingdom of heaven. It's appreciated on earth in the kingdom of darkness. And how we've gotten so far away from being able to just confess our faults one to another, you don't see that anywhere. And how have we gotten away from that? There's freedom in it. And anyways, I'm jumping way ahead. Let me go back. Let me go back to the beginning. The walk east began September 6th of this year, 2011. at 9 o'clock at night. The story actually goes back a bit further than that, but that's where the walk began. And I probably need to tell you a little bit of the background, I guess. Actually, my knee was shattered April 23rd of 2010. Spent 10 days in the hospital where God said, hey, that was me that shattered your leg, and now you're going to sit down and learn how to listen. So that's where it began. And a year of rehabbing my leg and trying to still my mind and just read Scripture and find out, okay, well, what is the truth? What's the truth here? God began speaking to me and teaching me how to hear his voice. And in April, I went out to the woods for a little while, answered a call to go do that. And just went out to the woods for a couple weeks, and that was awesome. God spoke to me there. And there's a whole different story of encountering angels and hearing the voice of God. Like, it's crazy. Oh, by the way, if any of this sounds crazy to you, it's because it's all crazy. All right, there's nowhere in the Bible where one of the authors, one of the people who actually penned the book, none of those people were ever accused of being sane. They were all people that heard voices from people that nobody else could see. All right, if you're not comfortable with that, then probably Christianity might not be for you. There's a story of an 80-year-old man talking to a bush that was burning but wasn't burning somehow, and he heard voices coming out of it. If you're not comfortable with that, this might not be for you. There's a story of a man that lived in a fish for 3 days. If you're not comfortable with that, then you know what I'm saying? The kingdom of heaven is the exact opposite of the kingdom of darkness, and therefore everything looks crazy. It looks crazy to the mind. You can't. It's hard to accept. You believe in God, so you believe that a man named Joshua actually looked up to the sun and said, "Sun, stand still," and they got an extra 12 hours of daylight because the earth stopped rotating. There's a different kingdom to live in, and Jesus lived in that kingdom, and he didn't care what people thought. He only cared what his Father thought, and that was it. It was the only concern that Jesus had, was his Father and his will, and bringing us back into the Father's will. Not a mixture of the Father's will plus our will. No, it was just the Father's will. So, I'm straying again. It's a hard story to tell. I just want to tell the facts, but it's the revelation that comes with it. It's nuts. So anyways, September 6th, 9 o'clock at night, after months of preparation, God tells me, okay, you're going to go for a walk tonight. Pack your stuff. And that's what I did. I packed up as light of a backpack as I could. Sleeping bag and sleeping roll and water bottle, toothbrush, that sort of thing. And called my buddy Reagan, and he dropped me off sort of on the outskirts of town and out in the mountain area of San Diego, place close to where I grew up. And I slept in a park and ride parking lot underneath a billion stars, and I can't describe the sense of peace that I felt that night. That I was exactly in the universe, exactly where I needed to be and where I was supposed to be. And I woke up the next morning with $8 in my pocket and just started walking. it sounds crazy. It's like I've grown accustomed to making a good deal of money and striving in this world and making it. It's a tough thing when you're 38 years old and you have $8 to your name and you're walking down almost an abandoned highway, you know what I mean? And I was totally at peace. Total peace, happiness, joy. And so I'm walking, and just that fact alone, just that, the peace, being in that place, in that position in life, and knowing peace. To walk in the will of God is peace. It's happiness. It's joy. And that's what we're all after. And that's where I was. Rich in joy, in peace. With my $8. Anyway, so I'm walking down the road. And by the way, I was told not to take any money, and I took $8. So that was kind of disobedience on my part. So I come upon this diner, and I needed some coffee, because I'm a coffee drinker. And I go into this restaurant, open up the menu, and everything is $9. Everything on the menu was $9, or $12 if you wanted the steak. And I sit down, and the lady comes up, and you got to keep in mind this is out in the mountains, so there's not a lot of people here. They're mountain people. And the lady comes up, and I say, I've got $8 here, and I need a cup of coffee and whatever else food I can buy with whatever's left. And she goes, oh, you know what? Don't worry about it. You can order anything you want, and I'll pay for it. I was like, what? I mean, miracle number one, right? Like, just immediately, half an hour into the walk, provision, food, right? Like if that had only happened once in the last 4 months, I would probably agree with what you're thinking right now. Like, oh yeah, well that's just, human compassion and blah, blah, blah. But no, this has been this is what my days have been like every single day from September 6th till this moment. Like, impossible stuff. Anyway, so I'm talking with her, and it turns out her son is about to get deployed to Afghanistan for the second time, and she's freaking out. Like, she's a mother. She's a bundle of nerves. Her son's going off to war again. And she's a mess. This sweet, kind lady is worried sick about her son. And that turned into a ministry opportunity for me to just speak peace into her life, and not preach at her and be like, oh, well, has he accepted the Lord Jesus Christ into his heart as his Lord and Savior? And like, none of that. Just to speak peace. To declare God's sovereignty and his majesty and his intent for us. When you start declaring God's majesty over things and his supremacy, peace is the response. That's what you get. Because people, whether they like to, agree with it or not, people have a spirit, and that spirit must bear witness of its creator. It has to. It's what it's designed for. And you start speaking, declaring those things over people, just that God is love, and God is in control, and he is Lord, and he is all power. He is all-knowing. He's all knowledge. He is everywhere and in everything. You start declaring God's majesty like that, and you see peace come over people, and they're dying for it. So, here it was. They're half an hour into it, and God's ministering to me, saying, you see, I got this. I got this. You're not, if I want you to eat, I'll feed you. It's going to be fine. And so I finished my meal. I finished ministering with her. I prayed over her and just left and started walking. And I can't, if you're not from San Diego, Southern California it's all high desert. And you get out in the mountains and it's just beautiful. There's trees everywhere and there's no humidity in the air, so that the air is cool and dry and just full of high desert smells. I was just having a blast, just walking down the road praying and just talking to God, and learning to hear him speak to me. And just, again, it's the peace. Peace is the way of the Lord. And it's what breaks his heart and makes him cry when you're not at peace. That's what makes Jesus cry. People that aren't at peace. And so there I was. I was experiencing exactly what God designed all of us to experience, peace. Walking down the road at 38 years old with still $8 in my pocket and a full belly. And I keep walking along, and, my pack was kind of heavy, and I had stopped for coffee at this other, I walked through this other town, and I met some Christian guys, and we were, ministering to one another, and that was really cool. It was really encouraging, and kept walking. And this lady who I'd never met before, Roxanne, had seen me I'd put a Facebook post up that, I was walking, and she saw it, and she drove way out to where I was, and just pulls up next to me on this old highway 80, it's called. It goes from California almost all the way to the Atlantic Ocean, as far as I know. And she just pulls up and she goes, "Hey, are you Pete?" And I'm like, "Yeah." She's, "Yeah, I brought you some water, whatever." And again, this isn't going to sound like a miracle, but it was. My pack was heavy. I had to send some stuff back that I didn't need. I'd packed too much stuff. She was there to pick it up. Again, if that was just a one-time occurrence of something like that happening, I would agree with what's going through your mind right now. Like, oh, that's just, she saw you on Facebook, so naturally. Well, yeah, okay, if it was that one time, sure. But this has been every single day of my life since September 6th. It's not a coincidence. What am I, the luckiest man in the world? I've bought lottery tickets before. I never won. I'm not the luckiest man in the world. These things are provision and favor from a God who has everything under control and doesn't need my help. He doesn't need your help. As a matter of fact, he doesn't want your help. But he does want you to want to help, and maybe we'll get to that later. But so there it was. I sent a bunch of the extra stuff I had, like my hoodie and just extra stuff, stuff I didn't need. Sent that back home, and the pack was lighter. And Jesus talked about that to his disciples. Don't take any money, don't take a script, don't take extra clothes. A lot of that stuff had to do with pack weight. Jesus is very concerned about what we carry in life. Whether it be literal or figurative, he's concerned about that. He wants you to be comfortable. He doesn't want you to carry a bunch of stuff that's not good for you, that you don't need. You don't need, if you don't need it, you're carrying stuff you don't need. It's heavy, and it's going to wear you out. So I continue walking, And I get to this, if you're, again, from San Diego, there's a place called the Sunrise Highway. And it goes over the Interstate 8 and goes up further up into the mountains in Julian, and it's real pretty. So I'm crossing the Sunrise Highway, and there's this electrician dude out there for SDG&E. He's out there fixing something. He starts out, I walk by, I'm like, hey, how you doing? And he starts asking me, what are you doing out here? I'm like, I'm walking with Jesus, man. I'm just gonna worship Jesus the rest of my life and see if that works. Because everything else I've tried, it doesn't work. And so he starts ministering, and we're talking about Jesus and talking about all this stuff. It was just cool, you know what I mean? It's like, man, I haven't even been walking half a day, and it's just been ministry, one after another. And so at this point, this is like the fourth person in like 3 hours that's been a ministry opportunity, for somebody ministering to me or me being able to minister to them or both, whatever. And Tony was his name. Sunrise Tony, as it is in my phone. And so we're sitting there talking, and he gave me like a bag of like fruit and stuff that he had packed that morning. He's like, man, it's funny, I don't even eat apples, and for some reason I just packed this bag of apples this morning on my way out the door. I don't even eat apples, but I brought them, and here, I think you're supposed to have these, And I think a lot of people would look at that and be like, a bag of apples, how was that a miracle? It's like, well, because you need food to live, dummy. And, and it was there, and it's provision. And you know what I'm saying? Like, God does other miracles too, other than, giving you money at 11:59 at night on the 31st of the month for your rent the next day. You know what I mean? Like, God, He does it all. And it's miracles. I mean, you have to be paying attention, because the miracles are never spectacular. You know what I mean? God doesn't show up on a, chariot of fire delivering stuff. Sometimes miracles are just a bag of apples, and you have to be cognizant of it. You have to keep your eye open for it, or you're going to miss all of the good stuff, because it's nonstop. You know what I mean? When you walk and you don't have to see anything other in your life than Jesus, and the only thing that you want to hear is the God who spoke the universe into existence. That's the only thing that you're concerned about. Trust me, you're going to, when that becomes your obsession, you're going to see it, and your eyes will be open to it, and you still have to pay attention, or else, man, you're just going to miss it. So anyways, got my bag of apples. Me and Tony are shaking hands saying, see you later. And I look over and over to the bridge, of the Sunrise Highway. And we see this guy sitting on the bridge. And you got to picture in your mind, we're in the middle of nowhere, all right? Like, we're far from civilization, any sort of town or city. Like, we're in the middle of nowhere on this bridge, and there's a dude sitting there who's not a hiker like me, and he's not an electrician like Tony. And we're looking over, and I said, and he was far away enough to where it was like, what is that? What are we looking at here? And I turned to Tony and I said, is that a human over there? That looks like a person. And he looks over, he's like, yeah, it's kind of weird. I wonder what he's doing out here. And as I'm looking, and I can verify this because I have Tony's number, and if you want it, you can call him. He'll tell you I said this. I looked over and I said, that's a demon. For some reason, I just knew. I could see it, but I can't explain what I saw. It was just like looking at something and just knowing. You know what I mean? It wasn't like something I saw with my eyes, but just something I knew. And so I said, all right, well, this is on my trail. I'll see you later, Tony. I got to go figure out what's going on over here. So I walked down. It was probably, 200 yards away, I guess. And I walk over there, and let me just describe what this dude looked like. Do you remember in Men in Black when they in the movie with Will Smith, when they went over to talk to the little dog? Remember the little dog that talked? He was an alien, and he had that old man standing right next to him. And Will Smith goes, "Oh yeah, that's obviously an alien." And it turned out that the dog was the alien. The dude that I was looking at looked like that old man. He had stringy, greasy, gray hair. He was very skinny. He was so badly sunburned that his skin was literally maroon, right? Where at once he'd been Caucasian, his skin was now maroon. And as I walked past, I kind of kept my distance, but as I walked past him, I said, "Hey, you need any water or anything?" And the dude didn't even flinch. Like, there was no recognition that I was speaking to him, right? And it was obviously not somebody else speaking to him. We were in the middle of nowhere, and nothing. Like, his face didn't even move. He was rifling through his little backpack or whatever he had. By the way, his clothes were very badly torn, very old clothes. And I mean, just the demonic presence was so heavy on this guy. And the thing is I didn't know what to do, like, I'm thinking in my mind, like, Lord, why am I dealing with this? I'm not an exorcist. I don't have that, whatever authority that you'd given your disciples about casting demons out. Like, I don't have that, whatever that is. Whatever that is, I'm not in possession of it, and yet there's this guy here who, anybody, go find me an atheist so I can show him what a demon looks like, and they would agree. Like, this dude was in pretty rough shape. And then this other guy shows up, this Border Patrol guy, and there's people that work for the Border Patrol, and their whole job is to go out on the trails, where the illegal immigrants come up the trails. Like, their job is to go out and make sure that there are bottles of water on those trails so that they don't die, right? And he was one of those guys. So he pulls up, and he asks me, he's like, "Hey, what's going on here?" And I said to him, "Look, I don't know what where you stand on, like, spiritual matters, but this is a demon-possessed man." Like, I'm trying to explain this to this guy, and she's just, like, looking at me like, "Who the hell are you?" Like, and I said, I offered him some water, and he was unresponsive. And so he says to him, like, hey, buddy, got some water here. Do you need any food or anything? And again, he's just sitting there, like, going through his backpack. And then he gets up, and this is like, here's the weird part. He gets up, grabs his back in like a simultaneous motion of standing and grabbing his backpack, and he begins to run into the hills that are, like, right next to us. And I need to describe this to you. This old man who was 0% body fat, because he lives out there in the hills. 0% body fat, just badly sunburned, old man, typical, demonic features on his face, the slumping, the droopy eye bags underneath the eyes, the slumped face, the overhanging shoulders, like, all of the, your standard, like, this is usually what people look like when they're oppressed. Had all of those features. He gets up and starts running on, the turf, not like a sidewalk or on the road, but in the wilderness, and he's moving like an animal, like with the grace and speed of like an animal, like a deer or like a coyote or something, when you're running like that and negotiating the turf flawlessly, not tripping over things. This guy was moving with the swiftness of an animal, and I wish I could, I wish I had like some video of it, because it was very strange to watch a human being move with that kind of agility over rocks and through bushes and whatever. It was supernatural. So that really kind of sent me for a loop. That's the end of that story. I kept walking, and I'm just thinking about it. I'm thinking about what I had just saw and why I needed to see that. You know what I mean? Like, that was obviously a divine encounter. There was a lesson to be learned there. And I think it was just kind of a foreshadowing, or kind of like, you drive down any highway and there's going to be signs on the road saying, hey, Poughkeepsie, 120 miles, whatever. You know what I mean? Like, there's going to be signs of things to come. And I think that was one of them, that, hey, welcome to the journey, Pete. This is day one. You're not even halfway through it. By the way, demons are real. I think that was kind of, the message. Because I was powerless. I didn't have whatever, whatever it was that Jesus and the disciples had to cast out demons. I don't have that, or I didn't then. So just walking down the road, now it's, now I'm walking down the road and everything's peaceful and I know exactly where I'm supposed to be is right where I'm at. But now I've got this thing in my head. Why is this? I've got something that's very real that I have to contemplate. I have to figure out what the meaning of that was. Because that was significant, And I was just walking and just kind of praying through it, kept going. And I come up to, it starts getting late. And I probably walked, about 20 miles that day. And I get to this campsite. Again, in the middle of nowhere. This campsite's at the close to the beginning of a trail called the Pacific Crest Trail, which goes from Mexico to Canada. And this is the campsite that's at the very beginning of that. And it's September, so there's nobody there. You know what I mean? You don't start walking that trail in September. And I get there's nobody there, and I'm thinking, cool, I've got this whole campsite to myself. There's running water here, those little water spigots coming out of the ground. And so I go to set up camp, and there's one other camper there. This guy named Steve, living out of his truck. And he's an old guy, and nicest guy in the world, but he's out there all by himself. And I'm like, oh, weird. Okay, divine appointment. Well, let's figure out what I'm supposed to do here. So I just start talking to the guy. Hey, what's your story? How's your life? Where are you from? That sort of thing. Turns out this guy has just completely given up on life. But he won't kill himself. You know what I mean? He's one of those people. He's just heartbroken and stunned in his life. Everything in his life has turned out badly, and he's given up, and he's got nowhere to go. And he just lives in his truck and lives out in the middle of nowhere because he can't stand to be around people. Not because he hates people, which he does, but because being around people is heartbreaking for him. It's not that people are disappointing. It's the fact that he can't he can't take any more disappointment. He can't go through another round in the ring with people again. And so he's out there living in his truck. You know, he's got his fold-out chairs. He's got his little bed in the back of his truck and his little barbecue grill thing, whatever. You know, like that's what he's done with his life. He's given up. And I'm just sitting there listening to this guy talk, and he's not telling me a sob story. He's just telling me very matter of factly, like, oh yeah, I'm just think I'm going to live in my truck and just kind of live out the rest of my life this way, and like it's just profound the level of heartbreak this guy has met. He's broken. And I started, it was nighttime, the stars were out, and I was like, I wanted to start ministering to him. But just like almost every Christian I've come encounter with, it's harder to introduce Jesus to Christians than it is to anybody else. Because a Christian will say, you'll see a Christian in bondage, and you'll say, hey, listen, I want to tell you about Jesus. And their response will be, oh, no, brother, I know Jesus. Don't tell me about Jesus. I know Jesus. And so you can't minister Jesus to Christians, unfortunately. And most of America is like that. 85% of Americans claim Christianity. This guy was one of them. You know what I mean? Like, one minute he's an atheist, the next minute he's telling me, oh, yeah, no, I've been to church, brother. I've heard it, And so that nonsense of, telling people, like, hey, if you don't worship Jesus, you're going to go to hell. Like that whole, however we got led astray on that path, I don't know. I wasn't there, but that was not going to work with this guy, Not that it would work with anybody. I would never tell anybody that because it's crap. But I had to start explaining like who God was, and not how the Bible, not how the writers of the Bible described him, but how God described himself to the writers of the Bible. Right? Like when Daniel saw God, like he wrote like, well, it was kind of weird what I saw. It was kind of like he had like a beard and he was all shining white, and there was a river that came from his throne. Like, he used a lot of analogies and like metaphors, whatever. But when you actually hear what God says about himself, it's other things. Like, I fill the universe. Or, I am. Oh man, you can meditate on that for the rest of your life. I am. You mean everything? I don't know. Is everything part of am? You know what I mean? Like, you hear when God describes himself, and it's mind-bendingly profound. And so I'm trying to explain this to this guy. I'm like, okay, look up in the sky. You see all those stars? You know how much power it takes to fuel a star, let alone a trillion of them multiplied by a trillion galaxies? You know what I mean? Like, I'm trying to get this guy to open his mind to how majestic this concept of God is. You know what I mean? Like, don't you understand? It's everywhere, and it's all focused on you, I'm trying to, explain to him that this God who says he is all power, everything that you can see, that's power, is God, and he is love, and it's focused directly on you. It's incredible. I'm trying to explain this to him. I don't know if it worked or not, but just trying to tell him, man, God, there's a better way, man. Like, there's a God who loves you and wants to talk to you. And he's paid a terrible price that this line of communication can be opened, And that's pretty much the end of that story. It's just, I don't have a conversion story for you there. I don't believe in altar calls, and I don't believe that, that people have anything to do with their own, process of salvation. It's all God, And, I hope that guy comes to the knowledge of the goodness of God in his life. But I don't have a story where, oh yeah, he fell down on the ground and repented and confessed Jesus as Lord and Savior. I don't have that. I just have the story of the appointment, that I was there to see that. And it was a shock to see that, that's where they're at, There's a lot of people, particularly ministers, that will say that people don't come to the Lord because they love evil. They love darkness rather than light, because that's what Paul said. And that's true. There's certainly a lot of people like that. But there's another element of people that they don't want to come into the light because the people that claim to be in the light are actually in the darkness. And now the people that are in the darkness and know it are confused when they look at other people in the darkness and say, well, it looks just as dark over there. Why would I want to come hang out with you? You're in the darkness too. It's just you're claiming that you're in the light. It doesn't work, So these people, that no one will love these people because they're not good looking, they're not wealthy, they're just broken. They're just broken people. They don't have any redeeming, sociologically redeeming qualities about themselves. All they are is broken. And they're living out in the woods, in their truck. And their name is Steve, and they're dying. And they don't want to come to your church because it's your church. They don't want to conform to your religion because it's your religion. And they've never met Jesus because you've never met Jesus. And that's where they're at. And that's what we've become as the church in America. Is a bunch of people in the darkness claiming to have the light. We claim that we have come in contact with a power that describes itself as being all the power in the universe, everywhere where you can see power. So that would be gravity, the thing that holds no less than 8 planets in our solar system together in an orbit around the sun. You realize how much power that requires? What keeps our sun in a constant state of explosion? Multiplied by trillions of stars, or billions or whatever in our galaxy, multiplied by an infinite number of galaxies. That's who God is. He is power. And simultaneously, He spoke all of that power into existence. Everything that we can see, God is in it, and He created it. We're dealing with an infinitely powerful being who describes himself and all of that as love, and that love is focused directly on you as an individual. What should a life look like that has that much power focused on it? What does that look like? I got to find out. I got to know. So, enough of the preaching. Do you see what I'm saying? It's not the miracle; it's the revelation. The seeing it all. I can sit here and tell you about, and I will. I'll tell you the stories of the miracles. But if the miracles are, by the end of the story, if the miracles aren't the unimpressive part, you've missed it. The miracles aren't supposed to be, they're supposed to be kind of impressive, but not compared to hearing the voice of God. That's the impressive part. That's the part that's going to keep you mesmerized in a state of fascination for the rest of your life, is hearing the voice of your Father, calling your name, calling you by name, and speaking his love and intent over your life. That's what's fascinating. And if you haven't heard it for yourself, that needs to become the primary concern of your life. Because if there is a God, and this, I'm convinced that there's most people claiming Christianity in the world today, they haven't ever actually asked themselves this question. You know, do you really believe there's a God? Because if you did, then there could be nothing more important than that. Because your life would bear witness to that fact. Everything in your life that you see is important, you go after and you make it a concern until it's achieved. Oh, you want to get married? Well, that's what you focus on until it's achieved, and then you're married. You know, well, I want to go to college and then get a job in my, desired field so I can make a certain amount of money and be married and have children and all that. Well, then that's what you go do. You make that. If you believe that that's possible, and you believe that that's available and exists, then you put your life into it, and you make it your concern until it's accomplished. If there's a God, if you truly believe there's a God, then there can be nothing more important than finding out what his will in your life is. We read a book that's been penned for 3,500 years of men and women who said, oh, this God, he loves you, and he's not disappointed in you, and he's never left you, and he loves you, and he really wants to talk to you. He wants his children back. If you truly believe that, if you truly believe that all that is true, then nothing can be more important. And if there is something more important than that, Jesus addressed that. And he talked about it over and over again. He said, it's. I know what your problem is. You don't believe. You don't believe. You don't believe. And that's fine. If that's the case, that's fine. God is still not upset with you because you don't believe in him. Just confess it to him. It's like the guy in the Bible. He said, Lord, if you don't heal my daughter, she's going to die. And Jesus says, well, okay. I mean, do you believe that I have the power to heal your daughter? And he says, yes, Lord, I believe. But not really. Help me in my disbelief. Help me in my disbelief, he said. Help me in my disbelief, he said. Because if my daughter getting healed is hinging on my belief, then Lord, she's going to die. So please, stand in the gap here and help me in my disbelief. And Jesus said, hey, cool. No problem, man. No problem. It's okay to tell God what he already knows, that you don't believe. Because I deal with this all the time, and I follow Jesus with my entire life, and I struggle with it. And I cry out to him and I say, God, well, why doesn't this happen? Or why doesn't that happen? Or why haven't you provided in this way? And why haven't you given me this thing? And why haven't you allowed me to hear this or see that? And the answer is always the same. I mean, somehow it's always profound every time he says it. But the answer is always the same. He says, Pete, that's easy. It's because you don't believe me. Oh, man. Still? I've been walking for 4 months, Lord. How come I still struggle with disbelief? No, it's because you're a human being. You know, you guys turned your back on me a long time ago. It's all right, though. I've paid the price. And we'll get there. Just keep following. Keep going. It's easy. He's not mad at us for not believing. He's not shocked that we don't believe. He's not up there like a lot of people will say, you know, like some angry, pissed off God that is waiting to backhand the entire planet for their disbelief. That is not God. It's not who he is, and that's not his intention for us. His intention is to help us to understand that is the problem, is disbelief. You don't believe it. You don't believe it, and you feel like if you confess that you don't believe, that everybody's going to know that you're a fraud. Right? All of your fraud Christian friends that are sitting next to you are going to know that you are a fraud. Well, part of that's true. They're going to know when you finally confess. When you finally confess that you're a fraud, everybody else around you is going to know that they're a fraud. And that's what they don't want. But don't worry about that. Your life is about your relationship with your Father. That's the meaning of life. Your life is about your relationship with the Father. That's the meaning of life. That's the meaning of your life. Don't worry about the meaning of their life. Right? You worry about the meaning of your life. And if you're not free to speak freely to your Father, to speak open and honestly, to worship in spirit and in truth, if you're not free to tell your Father the truth, then you're not free. And you don't worship the Father. You can tell him the truth. It's okay. He knows. He knows that you don't believe him. You start confessing those things to him, and it's going to be a party, I'm telling you. He'll start showing you stuff like, oh, no, that's cool. Like, that's what I came for. That's why I came to you guys. I know. Cool. Thank you. Thank you for speaking openly to me, he'll say. He loves it. He's just like he's like us in that respect. Just tell him the truth. May get a little uncomfortable at times, but man, there's freedom in the truth. I'm telling you. Anyways, where was I? The dying, yeah, they're out there. Steve living in the truck. So, wake up the next day, and beautiful morning. Beautiful. Start walking again. And I'm tripping out on that. Just that whole, the day before, and talking with Steve, and talking with Tony, and the crazy demon-possessed guy, and Roxanne picking up my gear and taking it back to her house, and the lady at the diner. Just, that was day one. You know what I'm saying? This has been my life for like 4 months. September, October, November, December, yeah. So I'm walking, and just a bunch of stuff happened. Ran out of water, and there was this house out in the middle of nowhere, and I just walked up to it and asked the guy for some water. And he's kind of a young guy with a young family, and he was like a fireman. He was a helicopter pilot for the fire department, and we ended up talking, and I was ministering to him for like 2 hours. And just, again, you start preaching freedom to people. It's just like, yeah, man, I'm just going to worship Jesus for the rest of my life. Oh, don't you think you need to, don't you have to go get a job and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh, yeah, you know what? I used to think that, but I just don't know anymore. Because every great men and women of the Bible, and since then, the Mother Teresa's and St. Francis and, Kierkegaard and, Martin Luther, like all these people are great, and they all kind of came to the same conclusion of, you know what, I'm just going to worship Jesus and see what happens. That's what I came to. I don't know. This guy's like telling me, oh, yeah, well, you should, you have to go to church to be a Christian. Just that whole thing. Because it says, don't forsake the gathering of the saints. Everybody becomes a theologian when somebody shows up that they don't agree with. It's so funny. But he was a nice guy, though. He's cool. So I'm talking with him. He gives me some water, and I continue on. And there were these attack dogs at one point that didn't attack me. They just evidently wanted to be petted. So I petted them for a little while. Kept walking. And then, towards the end of the day, so again, it's another 20 miles. And I get to this point, I had walked through this town, and I was kind of looking for a place to sleep, like a field or something, And I just felt like I was supposed to keep walking. And I know that doesn't sound miraculous, but keep in mind, I shattered my knee last year. I'm 38. I'm not in shape. You know what I mean? I'm not an athletic guy. And I walked 20 miles the day before, and I've walked, a good 15 miles on this day. I'm tired, and my bones hurt, and my muscles are seizing up. And, but I just felt like God was telling me, no, it's not here. It's further down the road. Keep going. And I'm walking, and that was the day, it was funny, that was the day that I found out that all the power in San Diego had gone out. From Arizona to Los Angeles, the power was out. This is the second day as I'm walking, and this is going to sound totally narcissistic, but, I'm not saying that God shut the power down for me. What I am saying is that God had me on the journey at precisely the right time for me to be where I was when the power outage happened. You know what I'm saying? If you guys go back to the news in September, you'll see that there was a power outage that had a pretty big effect on the United States for 2 days or whatever it was. So, walking, tired, it's hot out. That dude that I was talking with had given me some, snacks and whatever. So again, provision. And I walked through this town where I'd found out that the power was out. I got to the other end of that town, and I just kept walking. And I was looking around, there was this creek bed. It was the bottom of the creek bed was all, really soft sand. And I was thinking, man, I could just, I could set up my little campground, right in there, and it would be super, it'd be like a mattress. You know what I mean? That sand was looking good. I wanted to lay down in it. I was tired. And, just in that place where you don't have anything left to give, you know what I mean? I was tired. My muscles hurt, my joints hurt. And I've been walking all day. I just wanted to lay down and go to sleep. And there was this wind behind me. And it wasn't just normal wind on you. It was a wind behind me, and I could feel God pushing me. Saying, no, just keep going. It's just a little bit further. The place where I want you to sleep, it's just a little bit further, And I was obedient to that. I just kept walking. And then about a half a mile past that, these dudes in this truck come up in this really nice, shiny, whatever, nice truck. And they were Mexican cowboys, because when you're out there, it's all people have horses and, ranches and stuff. And these guys were Mexican cowboys, you know, and I'm familiar with them because that's, you know, I